Okay. I am welcoming Briana Smallwood to It's Funny You Ask. Hi, Briana. How are you?
Good. Hello. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, okay. I don't know. Have we ever met in person before? I
No.
think okay. I
Yeah.
was trying to remember. There was a woman that I met very briefly that I somehow in my brain connected to Vivian Soul Food a couple of years ago. And then when I saw your picture, I was like, oh, that's not that girl. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what my brain did in there. But then I was like, no, I don't think I have ever met her. So it's funny because this podcast, I've met several people for the very first time on. So I'm always yeah, pretend like we're having coffee and meeting for the first time. So here we are.
Yes, here we
So
are.
tell me a little bit first about home life. Like what's home life like for you? You told me you grew up in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
So you're home, but what is mom, wife, what do you do at home?
I am a wife first. So I'm married to a risky entrepreneur, hence Vivian Soul Food. Um, I'll share more about that story a little bit later, but it was not planned, not intentional. And here we are, 3.5 years later, with what I believe, and I don't want to sound big headed, but with what I believe is kind of like a household name of a restaurant. People know about us.
I would agree. It is really coming quickly. That status is quick.
It's insane. I mean,
Feels quick.
we started out with 9 tables 3 years ago. 9 tables. Our POS system we used an iPad for. A chalkboard is what we had our menu on, and it was really just kind of let's see what happens. My husband is, like I said, he's an entrepreneur. He had a skill. So he threw this thing together, and I mean, it was like boom. And so then me, having kind of my background business sense, I started really quickly trying to implement processes. We had to hire people, and it just grew and grew and grew, and it's continuing to unfold. But so I'm that. We've been together for about 12 years. We have 2 children. They're 7 years apart. So they're
Oh
two.
wow.
Yes.
You did it
So
twice.
twice, and it's so we did it twice because they're like the same kid visually. So my youngest, she there's photos of her older sister around the house, and she will not let anybody tell her that it's not her. She thinks it's her, and she'll tell people, "Look at me," but I'm like, "That's not you." But so we have our 2 girls, 2 years old and 9 years old. My 9 year old is brilliant and mature. She's really soft. She's very reserved. And so she's been on my hip since she was born. I mean, pretty much anywhere I went for her whole entire life, she went with me. And so she's been exposed to a lot. And so the way that her brain works now, it's amazing. A quick example of that is she's trying to start a cookie business right now. And the other day she said, okay, mom, I figured out how many cookies I have to sell in order to make $100 a week. But the problem I'm running into is that I'm going to have to hire somebody to help me. And I don't have a lot of money left over. And so
No.
the fact, she doesn't even understand it, but I'm like, you just put together financial projections and you're figuring out
No.
what your cost is and your profit. Yes. At 9.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that really goes to show I've got my kids on my hip too, and they see so much. And I know they understand different things living with entrepreneurs. Did you have a
yeah.
background in did you own a business before this? Oh,
No,
mm,
no, but I'm a operations manager in business.
okay.
So I have a lot of business experience there, business acumen from corporate world, not small business, and they're two completely separate beasts.
Yes.
Um, yes, but so yes, that's my 9 year old, my 2 year old. She is my wild child. She doesn't stop moving. So unlike her sister, she gets to go nowhere. If we want to go out to eat, I'm like, let's see if they have carry out because she can't go in a public place yet. She's just wild.
I think too when you get when you only had with your older one, you got that, and she was probably like perfect, made you think like you had parenting figured out, right? I feel like
100%.
God does that to
Yeah.
us with our first children. And my kids are my stepkids, so I didn't even have them when they were super tiny, but the youngest was 2. But that older one will make you feel like you are on top of the world. You know what's up. And then the younger one is like, oh, watch
Well,
this.
you know what I say is that for the past almost 4 years now, our life has just been go, go, go because of the business. And my youngest keeps me out of the business because she's not allowed to go there.
Right.
you
Yeah, she
know, to
ruins everything.
Yeah, she's all over the place. So I'm like, God did this on purpose because he knew that I had to have something that kept me home and kept me out of
Oh.
it. So that way I wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm putting this together in my head. So you said 4 years ago, which I kind of want to go back there to how this kind of started, Vivian Soul Food. And if you're not local, Vivian Soul Food is exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like grandma's hug.
Yep.
That's what it sounds like to me. Like when you need a hug from your grandma's home cooked food and like really good food, that you just need to feel good, that's where you go. So you said 4 years ago, and then you said your daughter's 2. So you started this, and in that first little bit of time when the honeymoon's over and entrepreneurship is terrible, then you're
Oops.
pregnant.
Yep.
Oh, girl.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Let's take a minute. Okay. So tell me okay, your husband is the impulsive one. You told
Yes.
me before we started, he's from Chicago. How did you guys meet?
We worked in a call center together.
Okay.
PVC, yep. So that, and then, we were young, so we were on the scene. So we would bump into each other, outside at the bars or whatever the case. And he was very persistent. So I didn't think that he was my type. I didn't have a whole lot of interest, but he would show up and show out every time. And one thing led to another. And yeah, we found ourselves in a relationship. And then a year later, or 2 years later, maybe, pregnant with our first child together.
Wow. Okay, so he is the spontaneous one, you said. And how did he come up with this idea? If you're working in operations, what was he doing at the time?
Okay, so he has lots of trades. He has a masonry certificate, so he is a professional bricklayer. This is just like out of, what am I going to do with my time? I don't know.
Learn to lay bricks. Why not?
Yeah, why not, right? So he has that. He's always cooked as a hobby, and out of passion. And so then a few years ago, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, he went to culinary art school. And again, not because he really had any desire to go work in somebody's restaurant, but just like, let me fine tune this craft. So he's always done not odd, but he's always just done different things over and over. And right before he opened up Vivian Soul Food, I had been in my career by that time for about 5 years. Our daughter was getting older, and I was like, dude, you have to, like, we need stability. Like, you can't keep doing this jumping around stuff. I don't jive with that anymore. We need a little bit more stability, consistency, so on and so on. And so we were in a weird growing space in our mid to late 20s at that time. Um, and his way to fix it, I was at home one day and I get a text message of a lease, a commercial space lease. And he says, all right, I figured out what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and open a restaurant. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
God. Oh my God.
yes, yeah. And it was a picture message at that. I'm like, the audacity. So
I mentor small business owners, and when anyone tells me I want to open a bar or a restaurant, I'm like, oh, let's take a big look at what you're
yep.
looking at. It's not
What's
an
the plan?
impossible, it,
Yeah.
but it takes a special person
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to there's a lot of moving parts in bar
So many.
restaurant.
So he got started and I kind of blew it off for the first couple of months. I supported him and I was, yay, go you, but I'm like, what are you doing? And I could have been more supportive. And then as he's spending money to build out this place, doing silly things, when I really got involved is I had gone up there one day and he had just purchased these 2 really huge wall hangings from Pier 1 and they cost like $700 each. And I was like, we don't have $1,400 to spend on art. Like, are you nuts? And he's like, well, I got to create an environment. And I was like, hang on. So what I did that same day and for that weekend, I went to Goodwill and Stuff Etc. and Salvation Army. And anyone who went to our 16th Avenue location, something that you may not know is that with the exception of those 2 huge, ugly wall paintings, 100% of everything we got came from a used secondhand store. I've went and found fake plants and I found just other things. And I juked them up. I painted some things and repurposed a couple of things. But I'm like, you can't just be out here spending money before we've even made money. And so
Just
that,
so you know, you are my husband and I am your husband. And I am so sorry for what he put you through because I know what I've put my husband through.
oh my gosh, it was insane. So that was the beginning of when I really kind of started getting involved with him. Then I'm like, okay, what licenses are we supposed to have for you to do this? Do you have a sales tax ID? Like, you can't just slap a name, you know? And so then I started applying for all of those types of things, getting them in order. Then I'm like, well, what are you going to do for employees? And he's like, I'm just going to talk to people and see if they want to come work. No, no, no. Hang on a minute. Like, we need to
My buddy this, my cousin that, so and
yeah,
so's girlfriend this. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I built out a just a job application and posted it online. And then I got a payroll established. We went and talked to an accountant and I said, okay, if we bring people on, what does that mean? I'm like, you know, I get a paycheck right now and there's stuff taken out of there. Do we have to do that? What does that look
Yeah.
like? You know, we start learning about those types of things. And so we did like an open house hiring event in 2017. I had like 4 people come and only one of them was, you know, what's the word? Just strong enough to take on a job working for a small business that had no processes in place. And I felt comfortable would be okay with that.
They
And
could
we got,
pivot, is what you're saying. That person could pivot and wear several hats.
yep, exactly, exactly. So we got going and then we opened up in June officially
June of
in
what year was?
2017.
Okay, and then that location is 16th Avenue location.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
and that's across from like, or right over by like Leonardo's, kind of near there, right?
No, down further behind Fairway. Fairway.
Oh, I guess I didn't know you were there originally.
Yes. So we were in this little strip mall. There.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Yes, now. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And the first maybe month, you know, it was really just a lot of family and friends, kind of to be expected. And then all of a sudden, month 2, we had a Sunday, one Sunday, and this big, huge school bus that was painted light blue showed up in the parking lot, and there were people just coming out of it. I mean, 40 people coming out of this bus. And we're like, what are they doing? Well, it
They
was
didn't call ahead.
no,
Oh,
no. And at that time in that location, I don't know if it's because it was so small or because we weren't really established as like a business or a restaurant. I don't know, but people didn't call ahead. On 16th Avenue, we didn't get called ahead. They just showed up. So we had like 40 people come in. It was an after church crowd. And then after that, we were like, oh, wait a minute. That's kind of who we need to target.
for sure, for sure. That is some Sunday food. So, I mean,
Sunday.
The other thing, quickly touch on like about your menu, because it is not only I mean, I'm just going to come from like the white girl that grew up in Iowa perspective. I had no idea what soul food ever was. And I think that I think that it's interesting that you were able to create such a successful business when, as we talked, the population of African American people in this county is something like under 10%.
Yes.
So, I mean, what a hill. Can you touch a little bit on like, I'm assuming, my assumption would be that the reason that's what you knew, that's what your husband knew, that's what you knew, like, hey, let's do something we can do really well, maybe something that's different, which can both be scary and a home
So
run.
him
Yeah.
him coming from Chicago, one of the things that he missed most was the food. You know, his mom wasn't here. My mom cooks for us, but not like his mom cooks for him or us. And so when we first started dating, I mean, we would go take day trips to Chicago just to eat, to get a meal. We drive, eat, and then turn around and come back regularly. I mean, this was a regular thing for us. And so he really, really missed the food. And so when he opened up Fibs, he's like, there's no other soul food here. And he's like, people will eat this up. They'll love it. And then he had gone to culinary art school. So he really paired just true Southern and soul cooking with being able to plate it and make it very, you know, eye appealing. And, you know, just really desirable that way.
Soul food has its roots in the South, right? And truly roots in slavery, from my understanding.
Really slavery. I mean, the truth about soul food is that the bulk of it came from, and how it came about is that it's the scraps that slaves were given and how they had to really put a lot of love and a lot of extra flavor and a lot of thought and creativity into building up these scraps to make them taste good, you know. Things like oxtails. That's something that when we first started on 16th Avenue, we threw away so many oxtails because people here it didn't sound good to them. They didn't know what it was.
I just made a face. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
no,
lie.
yeah. Once people got wind of it, now we sell out of oxtails every single Friday and Saturday. Like we cannot have enough oxtails in store. When oxtails are on the menu, they go like nuts out the door. I mean, and there
Mm.
are people, they'll come and order like 3 or 4 orders at a time just because they know it's only a weekend thing and they want to have leftovers, for going forward in the week. So yeah, so soul food definitely came from slavery and really getting creative with the scraps that we had and making them taste really, really good.
Yeah, let me tell you, I tried collard greens as a child and a young adult, and I thought they were the most terrible thing I'd ever put in my mouth.
We
And
didn't have
then
to cook right.
I went to a soul restaurant in DC with my friends, and I was like, oh, 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 this like, I mean, okay, now I'm on board, but I feel kind of the same way about kale too. So it's not just
Yeah, it takes a lot of cleaning and preparing all the foods from the meats that we use to the vegetables that we use. They have to be properly cleaned and then they have to be really well seasoned. And a lot of times, for most of them, they have to cook for extended amounts of time with seasonings and other vegetables and onion and all that good jazz in them to bring out the flavor.
right. So you didn't really grow up with like soul food, but your husband did. And so was this like a big sense of pride for him to bring this to the community? Was it like just like drawn from way deep down that this needed to be?
He's still, I mean, yeah, no, he's really, really prideful of it. In fact, just last week, so we have 2 locations now. Our second location is on the northeast side. And last week, again, I'm just being very transparent. We love our whole community, so I hope no one takes offense.
Yeah,
But
please do.
a white man in like the latest year possible, big chunky Mercedes-Benz truck pulled up. And
Yeah.
he came in and ordered a bunch of food. And my husband, Jerome, he called me right after that. He was like, you won't believe the clientele we get over here. He's like, they love it, and he's like so proud of it because it's just a genre of food that you would, it's has so much ties to culture that when we started Vivian Soul Food, we had the discussion a lot. We're either going to sink or it's going to go up. And we didn't know which one it was going to be, but had it sunk when we were on 16th Avenue, we were prepared for that. We understood the loss that we were facing, that we could be taking. And we had decided what we would do in the event. It didn't last very long and we had to close down and start at the drawing board doing something else with life. We've been really, really blessed and really, really fortunate that it went the opposite direction. And I'm like, we still,
Yeah. I mean, but
this is a real thing.
what better way to even have the most uncomfortable conversations than over a meal and over like a real heartfelt meal? And you know what I think about is a lot of people that probably enjoy your food probably have never asked the question of where these like dishes came from or what their history is. And maybe they never will ask it, but I would be, I mean, I could assert very, very highly that at some point someone will read about something and that connection, that full circle will be made. Maybe the guy in the truck will, connect that, he just had a meal that started in this place and that this is why. And maybe it'll connect and come full circle. Maybe it never will, but what better way to have a conversation when, I mean, they say,
Yeah.
your what is it, the way to your heart is through your stomach or something. Like it's
Yeah.
not just men in romance, right?
No, it's not. It's
all
people.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while we're there, can you tell me what were your fears as an African American family starting a African American business in a really predominantly white place? We can't pretend like we're not this white here.
Mm-hmm. So, oh my gosh, that's a good question. And honestly, we probably don't have enough time. But
Okay.
what I will say is that something that we decided right away is that we knew it was going to be a struggle. We knew we'd have to do a lot of explaining ourselves, and not just explaining of ourselves because of, as a means of like defending ourselves, but explaining ourselves as in providing insight so you understand how we do, why we do what we do, and how we do it. But then just the other thing is that we decided long ago as well that we weren't going to use being Black in business as like a marketing scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't. Every now and then things happen that are big enough that I feel like I want to use it as an educational, method, but never do we, use the we're Black in business, so please support us because there's no one like us. We want people to come to us because we have a good product. We're good at what we do. We provide good service. So an example is that, I had posted on our social media last week or the week before about an incident that happened in the restaurant, where someone they didn't want their food prepared by a Black person. Every single news outlet reached out, every single one. And then after they reached out and we politely declined, they started showing up at the restaurant. And every time I told them all, and I told all my staff, I said, if you guys want to talk about this, I said, I'm not going to stop you. Do your thing. It's your story. Like, some of you were there to experience this. So I'm not going to stop you. I said, but my thing is, I don't want it to be used as a method to gain sympathy. I put it on social media only as a way to provide insight. And we declined. And there was one news outlet that responded back and said, okay, well, if your Facebook status wasn't graceful enough, this response is so commendable. Thank you. And
what a hard decision to make, though, Briana. Like, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and in your employee's shoes, in your husband's shoes, in your community shoes. And my calendar says 2021, and I would prefer to pretend those things aren't still happening, and I would prefer to believe that they're not happening in my community. Damn.
But here's the thing, though. The thing is, and again, no, I hope this doesn't come off too harsh, but you're white. So of course you don't feel like they're happening. We are Black. So that particular instance was a little bit more bold than just the normal arrogant person. But this is, it's a part of our daily lives. There's nowhere in this city that we're going to go and we're not going to be the oddball.
Yeah. You just shocked me. I'm not going to lie. I am shocked that happened to you in any recent time. Like, my blood pressure's up in this, because I want to be able to tell you that those things aren't going to continue. Those things aren't happening. And I'd rather pretend like the little things that still happen are just like, maybe they're coincidental. Maybe it's residual. It's going away. It's on its way out the door.
It's baked into our society, and I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's so, I hope for the years for things to continue to improve, and for the gap to close, and for, everybody to not see color, as they say, or whatever the case. But for as long as it does continue, it's a part of our life. We're resilient to it. We don't take offense to it. And in fact, I take pride in instead just educating people. And it is.
Yeah. I guess if it wasn't happening, there would be no reason to educate or to bring it out. And you certainly could have made that a media storm, and no one would have blamed you, myself included. I'm kind of like, no, I feel like you should have done that interview. But yeah, that is really classy. And it's hard to make those decisions as a business owner. I've come across having to defend myself or not, having to make a point or not, choosing the long-term action. I read this book one time that said, when you're deciding whether to respond, especially hastily, to a really high emotional situation, put yourself on your deathbed, and how will you feel about the way you reacted? Can you look back on the situation on your deathbed and be proud of the way you represented yourself and handled yourself? And I think it was because, it's like, I think about drama, basically, when in the moment it doesn't seem that important, but at the end of your life, it becomes your legacy and how you respond to things. Yep. And you will be remembered for that. But at the same time, like, I wish you didn't have to even have that problem.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Like, I am really shaken up about that. Like, God, I didn't even know that happened. You had mentioned so you applied to speak at the Next You conference and to tell your story. And in your application, you shared some statistics that I would love to get more insight from you on about being both a woman of color in a predominantly white place, and then also as a business owner. There's a lot that goes into that. I told you I've talked to Maurice Davis many times. He is like my sounding board when it comes to attracting diverse audiences. And when you own, for me, owning a women's conference means all women. And I know, I have heard, I am very open to conversation. So people, they get that about me pretty quick and will be honest with me. They haven't felt comfortable always applying to speak at this predominantly white conference. So first of all, we're thrilled to get your application, and all the women of color that have applied or have showed interest, we know we're getting somewhere. And, you know, Maurice had told me, if you're able to have 10% of your clientele, your attendees be of color, then you're doing the right thing for our community for right now. So did you have hesitations of, you know, seeing past conferences of all white women? Tell me about
Yeah.
that thought process for you.
So actually an associate of mine is on your board. And so I see her post over and over about, not over and over, excuse me. I've seen her post about you conferences. So last year I intended to attend, but some things came up. I wasn't able. So this year it came across and I was like, okay, I have to go ahead and get my ticket early. I know how this goes. I learned last year. And so I went online so that I could kind of explore and go ahead and get my tickets early. And I saw the application process there and I thought, oh, wow. So I literally actually at that moment made myself a couple of notes, like, if I were to speak, what would I speak about? Like, how could I make an impact? Is this something for me? And I had this desire to speak. Well, the application window closed like on the 13th or the 14th, whatever the date was. And it was the very next day, after kind of pondering it for a few days, I went back online. I was like, dang, wait a minute, this window is closing. So I left it alone. Well, this associate of mine then reached out like a couple of days later and she says, have you ever thought about speaking? She said, did you get your tickets yet? Have you ever thought about speaking? And I was like, well, yeah, I thought about it, but the window closed. I'm good. She was like, it's going to be reopened. It's being extended. So get your stuff in right away. And I was like, we'll see. You know, and my hesitation was exactly what we're talking about. My hesitation was, is this a group where I'll fit in at? Is this a group where my story will have any type of impact to the audience that will be in attendance? Is this a group where I feel comfortable enough sharing my story too? You know, is this where I want to be? So not even that I don't have a story or that I didn't want to attend or I don't want to be involved in platforms like this, but was it right for me, this particular group? Well, what's wrong with the group? It's all white women. Hang on a minute, you know? And so then I did, after she reached out, I went ahead and I submitted and I told my husband, I was like, if they reach back out, they reach back out. If they don't, they don't. He was like, oh, they're reaching out. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get too hung up on it. He was like, oh, they're going to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a hard choice, and not only because you're a woman of color. Yes, we have a desire to have more women of color on our stage, and I will not like tiptoe around that. It is my desire to have stories come from all backgrounds of people, and as many as we can bring to our stage. I think the more our message can be heard, and I'm not afraid to say that. But especially having an established business that you have with such a reputation, that was like, we were like, absolutely, we really want her to tell our story. And then also the sharing of the statistics you did, you know, about the one that caught me really off guard was, and you'll have to, I don't have it up, you, and so hopefully you remember it,
Yeah.
but about African American women that are married.
Oh, yeah.
Low percentage of African American women that get
It's
married.
a statistic that 70% of Black women don't marry.
That blew my brain. And then so I started thinking, and I shared with you earlier, being in the beauty industry, and having like a national audience in the beauty industry. I work with women all over the country, all over the world. I know a lot of Black women, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like ticking them off in my head. Nope, she's not married. She's not married. She's not married. Okay, she used to be married, but she's no longer married. And I
Mhm,
was like, wow, there must be,
mhm.
that must be true. Not that I didn't believe you, but I was
Trust,
like, that seems weird.
trust and foundation, and culture, all of those things are so important, you know, and I've had this conversation with my husband many times over as well. You know, he has shared stories. This is unpublic. Should I don't know. But young boys in our community are oftentimes like encouraged not to be in relationships, you know, like elders, aunts and uncles and older cousins will say, oh, don't tie yourself to one person. And young women are taught and encouraged there's nothing you can't do by yourself. You go do that. You go do that. You know, and so we
Mhm.
don't need each other. And so, yeah, the statistic of just long standing marriages, it's not very
Yeah.
high in our community. Now, I will say that I'm so fortunate and blessed to see around me to have, you know, a nice amount of examples. Um, and and I will say, I hope that we can be that example to our children and to all of their peers, my nieces and nephews and whatnot as well in their future. And maybe, you know, hopefully change some things. But yeah, no, it's an accomplishment. It really
Well,
is.
and it never occurred to me either that like the message of being a strong Black woman, which is a strong message, a powerful message, it's one that every single one of us have heard, would come with, well, then you don't need a partner because you can do it on your own. And not that you can't, and that, you know, so then you have this weird back and forth of like, well, no, you can do it on your own. But also it's nice to have a partner in life with,
Yeah.
you know, whoever
I
that might.
say, I'm a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we're together. And that's really what we aim and aspire to be. Like my husband will say all day long, I can't do anything without her. Who would I be without her? And then, you know, when he gets in his feelings, he'll say, I could do it without you. I know I could. It just would be hard. And likewise, I feel the same way. What? I can't build this life without you. What would I be doing? Like if I didn't have you and you're like spontaneous and risk taking and go getter self, what would I do? Be comfortable, you know, working a standard minimal job? I wouldn't be the confident woman and professional that I am today. I don't know. I'm not psychic. But what I'm saying is that we complement each other and we know that. And we know that we're so much more powerful together than we are as individuals and separate. And that's enough. That's enough to weather the storms and continue our own personal growth as individuals and as a couple, and for our children, you know?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I'm sure having a daughter, like, you know, when you were first talking about, you know, your daughter kind of being on your hip, your older daughter always, and you know, my thought that I didn't say was, you know, no pressure, mom, and I feel that way a lot. You know, our girls are watching us, and they're and the messages that are out there, and there's a lot that I desire to change, and I would be interested in knowing. So the thing the example that came to mind for me, and I think all women probably deal with this. It's not definitely just a white woman thing. It's an all woman thing. Was, you know, like when my daughter came home from school and a boy was kind of picking on her, and it was pretty obvious that maybe he liked her and didn't know how to deal with that or something. But I don't want to say those words. I don't like those words. And she said, well, somebody had told her, well, he just is treating you that way because he likes you. And I didn't want to discredit what that person said. That person's I didn't want to discredit it because I know she's going to hear it often in her life.
Yep.
And I said, you know what, she's right. He probably is treating you that way because he likes you, but he doesn't respect you. And
Wow.
that is the difference. If he talks to you the same way in front of his mom or the teacher as he does when he's teasing you, maybe he respects you, but I'm just going to say he's probably not teasing you when the teacher's around or when his mom's around, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, so that's disrespect. And that's what he hasn't been taught. And that's like, you know, those messages are ingrained. And so I'm certain you have some ingrained messages from growing up as a Black woman in a white community that you want to change for your daughter. What are those conversations and what does that example look like for you?
Well, first I'll put this out there too. So the thing about me is that I'm biracial actually. So
Oh,
my mom
oh,
is,
more complicated.
yeah, yeah, very much so. So my mom is white and my father is Black. And so for me personally growing up, you know, I was never white enough for the white girls and never Black enough for the Black girls.
That
So
is true.
I had some identity challenges and issues really up until adulthood when and I would say when after my first daughter was born, where I was like, I am me. Like, I'm not going to try to be that or whatever. Like, I am just going to be me. And that was, you know, I call that year, I still remember to this day when I kind of like found and accepted myself for who I am. I call that my glow up year still.
It's an
And
intentional thing that happened for you.
yes, it was. And so the challenges that I went through and experiencing it from both sides of the fence, no, that's not something I want my daughter to go through. And so what I've really tried to be intentional with her about is just making sure that she is 100% confident in herself. I shower her in compliments regularly. I try to be aware of it because I don't want to blow her head up too big, but I want her to be confident. And that's really the only strategy I have. She's a girl. She's going to go through it. She's going to have her feelings hurt from time to time. She's going to hurt feelings from time to time, and she'll learn after it. But I would say, I think that because of the way her father and I are raising her, I mean, she's definitely a reserved child, but she is very confident in her and who she is. She has a bag that she carries. It's her her purse whenever she leaves the house, and it says Black Lives Matter on it. And we just recently were at an outing, and one of her friends said, "Why do you always carry that?" And she looked at him, and she looked at me, and she was like, "Because Black Lives Matter." Duh. And so it's just little things like that, where I've also seen children her age feel like, and even in my workplace, in my business, I have Black Lives Matter shirts made, and some people have said, employees have said, "You think we're going to tick people off? So what if we do?" I mean, then we just don't want them to come back. My daughter, she doesn't think that way. She is definitely, she's her own person.
Do you see a difference in our community in the way your daughter's able to grow up versus some of the things that you heard? Is it not different enough?
No,
it's not. Enough, is it? Yeah, that sucks. I mean, that's kind of what I thought you were going to say, and I didn't. But that's, yeah, it's, coming from my point of view. My daughters are 12 and 14, and my 14-year-old has, her tight group of her 3 friends. And her and one of the girls are white, and actually they are like a clone of each other. It's very strange how they look the same. And then one of her friends is a biracial. Her dad's Guatemalan, and then her other friend is African American. I don't know if she's mixed race or not. I've never asked, but I'm proud of her that, because I didn't have friends of another race. Now, I went to a small school in a very small town, and there was no one of any other race in my school. I don't think at all, at least not in my, if there was, I just didn't know.
Right.
I mean, maybe here or there, but not generally. So I didn't have the exposure, but I'm proud of her for it. And when Black Lives Matter came up, that was where my head and heart went first, is how are my girls going to respond to this in a way that honors their experience, but also their friends who they probably don't understand their experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was a weird thing to explain.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to say it out loud to a kid, and you start talking about like that people are treated differently, very vastly differently because of their skin color, it is emotional to me. Like, I just put myself in the shoes of like the mother of that little girl, and hearing things because of her skin color, things that are said. And it's just like, how would you fight that? Like, you can't fight it. So my kids have done good at listening to the conversation, but how have you educated your daughter? And actually, I'd like you to know 2 things. What are some things that you've educated your daughter with that conversation? And how do you, because I know you got a lot of white friends, how do you educate your white friends on it? How do you talk about it?
Man, this conversation is kind of tough.
I bet it is. But there's probably no one way. There's no like, well, when I talk to white people, this is how I start speaking. It's not like that.
No. I think it really just comes down to, we really just try to be us, and if we feel a certain type of way, we share that. If we have insight that someone else isn't seeing, then we share that. I don't really have a strategy.
Is it hard to not come from anger? Is it hard to not be angry? No. Good.
I know it is for a lot of people. But for me, it's not. And I think that's just my personality though. But my husband, I mean, he's the same way. Like, when we've had conversations like this, and some of his guys are like, his friends are like, how you let that happen? Or why didn't you do something, with this or that or whatever? And he's like, because it was ignorance. They don't know me. I don't care how they feel about me, and we're just so truly ourselves. And then, like I said, when an opportunity presents itself, when someone isn't understanding or has questions or, says something that we don't agree with, then we start a conversation. But I don't need to start a debate. I don't need to start some type of defense. And I don't go out of my way to I don't go out of my way to bring light to it. We just live life. You know, we chose to live here. We know what this is like. I've been here for my entire life. And I think that just like the entire rest of the country, there are pockets of ugliness,
Mhm.
and it is what it is. But there's a lot of goodness at the same time.
Yeah,
We're
you
very
wouldn't be
prideful,
here if it was like a terrible place to
you
live, and I
know?
hope that's not the message, that's being
Yeah,
shared.
no, not at all. Absolutely. So we're just building and growing, and we just try to really be so genuinely us, which also, as you know too, I'm sure, as you grow and you old and you mature, you evolve. And so your perspective on things change, your approach to things changes. And we've had, I mean, the amount of evolution that we've had as parents, as partners, as business owners in the last 4 years, it's I'll throw up in my mouth. It's so crazy. We're like night and day.
Well, our not our or let's see, it would have been our March of 2020 conference, which turned into a June of 2020 conference. We had our keynote speaker for that was Akwi NG, because I truly gave her a very specific phone call and asked her, because it was in the heat of the pandemic and the real heat of the Black Lives Matter movement. A month or so after the George Floyd incident, and tensions were high, and our theme was grace. And I felt like if I ignored the race situation altogether in that conference, that was wrong.
Mhm.
But I felt like me addressing the race situation in our country was also not going to be heard. It wouldn't feel genuine. It wasn't genuine if I shared it.
Mhm.
I mean, I've experienced things as a woman, but
Right. Right.
never, it's just
We've
different.
been
It's a
through it.
different layer.
Yep.
So I specifically called her and asked her, hey, I want you to speak. I want you to address what's going on in our country. I want you to address the hard feelings. I want you to address the hard conversations. And of course, she was happy to do it. And she's a phenomenal speaker and did a beautiful job. But it's hard to be intentional about wanting those things without feeling like, well, I only want you here because of your skin color, because it can come across that way. I'm not gonna lie. When you think about what you're going to share at the conference, what do you want at the end of the day? What would you want both women of color to take away, and then also what would you want white women to take away from the conversation?
So my approach to the conference is just going to be that whatever you've made up in your mind that success looks like erase it. And if you want to be successful, then you better put yourself in that vision right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when the conference comes, I'm gonna, I don't want to
Yeah,
leak
yeah,
too much, but I am not. I am not by default what if you envision a successful woman, I do not look like her. Nothing about me looks like her. Not the way I look physically, not the way I speak, not my credentials or lack of, not my upbringing, not the house that I own and live in, not the very untraditional relationship that my husband and I have built and that's evolved over all these years and some of the things that we've gone through. Nothing about me looks like what I 5 years ago thought to look like a successful woman. And I'm really just going to spend a lot of time focusing in on that if you want to be successful, you better put yourself in that bubble right now and start seeing yourself as that successful person. Um, a story, and I'm not going to go too deep, just a couple moments here, is that in my corporate world, really long story short, when I was in my early to mid 20s, there was a leadership role available, and I spoke with a colleague who was technically a superior but not my immediate boss, and I said, I think I'm gonna submit for that. I think I'm ready. And he was like, oh, no, no, no. He's like, no. He's like, you're gonna slap yourself in the face if you do that. Don't let yourself down. He's like, you got a long way to go before you're ready. Don't let yourself down. You'll be deterred. If you do that, you're not gonna get it. And then when the time comes that you are ready, you'll be deterred by that point, because you won't believe that you can do it. And I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't offended. I wasn't upset with him. I just thought, like, he has a point. Like, everybody in leadership roles are these white men who have 10, 15, 20 years in some cases with the company. I'm not that. I have 2 years with the company and I'm a Black 24-year-old female. Like, I can't do that. Well, surprisingly enough, about 2 weeks later, my actual manager at that time said, hey, I know you saw that role. How come you haven't put your name in the hat? Why haven't you submitted? And I was like, well, I mean, I thought about it. And basically I was told, if you want it, it's yours, but we have to go through the process, you know, with recruiting and HR. So put your submit in. And I said, okay. And so I did. I did get the role. So now I became my associate who told me not to do it. We became equals, and we were in the same job function. And then about 9 months after that, a very similar situation happened, but without my sideline conversation with him. And I became his boss, and he was my direct report. And he,
Oh, that is good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is good.
And so I say that to say that if you're confident and you know you have the skills or you know how to get them, stop deciding what the person who you think is worth that role or that level of success or that money or, you know, whatever, and put yourself in that bubble and just go and get it, like take it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's amazing. That is a great story. And I think I mean I can just put myself in the shoes of a 24-year-old that, you know, wants something that somebody tells her she can't have. And you either then you do like you tuck and run or you go for it. And either way, going after something big is
Mhm.
scary. Having the additional things about, you know, being a woman or being a person of color or having
Oh,
a
yeah.
disability or whatever,
In
you
that
know.
situation, I was female, I was young, I didn't have tenure with the company. I don't have a college degree. I now have a lot of experience, but I don't have a college degree. Um, I was a young mom, so I had like this crazy personal life, and I had this very established, very professional white man who I aspired to be, who I looked at and I was like, man, you're so bomb. Like you pull up in your BMW every day. I want to do that. You have an office. I'm in a cubicle. I want to do that. And he told me, no, 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 don't deter yourself. You're not ready. And I thought, okay, I took it. I took it and I agreed. And had my boss at that time not asked me, why didn't you? You have all the skills. I would not have pursued it. So it took someone else giving me that kick. And from that time forward, no one else will have to nudge me again. If I think that it's something I want, I'm going to go get it.
Thank God you had that experience. And I'm glad you're able to share that because you'll hopefully save somebody else from not going after something.
Yep.
I recently read this article that said that, you know, if you see a job out there, like a job ad, and a woman and a man with the same set of skills will see the advertisement. And because a woman will feel like if she's not 90 to 100% qualified, she should not apply. She has to keep working until she can apply. And a man will be something like 40% qualified and then wonder why he didn't get the job and will go after it, you know, like, and I think we have raised our sons to believe in what they bring to the table. Maybe, like you said, you could acquire the skills. I think we raise our sons to believe they can acquire the skills, and we raise our daughters to, well, you have to get those skills, and then you can have that.
Yep.
And I don't think anybody's doing it on purpose. I
No.
just think it's
just the way the American culture is.
Yeah, it's just how it went down. And you know, there's part of me that wants to say that about, like, you know, the race war in America right now. I don't even like to call it that, but there's part of me that wants to say, okay, like at what point do we just accept that this is where we're at and we move forward from it? But that's coming from a perspective of somebody that's not living in those shoes every day. And that's
well, and just I mean, 60 years ago, women didn't work. They were at home. And 50 years ago, there were still water fountains, you know, women of all colors were at home. 50 years ago, there were water fountains for Black people purposely and white people respectively, you know. I mean, so we're not, time is changing, you know. Here we are right now on this conversation to a white and a Black woman talking about business work. This is not like we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to take a lot more time for the gap to continue to be closed, because there's certainly still one there that exists, but things are happening now, you know. Things are happening.
Yeah. Well, I applaud you for stepping on our stage and for giving us a chance to show you that we want to be inclusive to your community and to other people like you, because you're going to show people that it's worth it. And I'm sure you'll be asked, like, what are you doing at this thing? Like, you know,
I've been asked already. They're like, what is that poster you put? All those white ladies. And I'm like, just come. Can you get a ticket, please?
Well, I mean, I remember I know exactly when I heard it. It was about 12 years ago now. A friend of mine was talking about just miserable And she said that she had a meeting with her therapist, and her therapist said, nothing changes because nothing changes. And I thought that was a really dumb thing to say. But like at some point, she was like, the message to her was, you've got to put in some change and some work to make change if you expect change to happen. And we have to put in some work now if we want like that ideal thing where I say, like, no, nobody that I know would be talking to a person of color that way in my community. So, like, I think in order to make that change happen, we have to do a lot of listening as people to each other. I think it's our turn to listen as white people, um, and to get our defenses down. And nothing changes because nothing changes. So if it's going to change, we all have to decide to do what we can to make it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's not easy. It's ugly. All change is not comfortable, though. I mean, if it was, people
Yeah.
would have done it a long time ago.
Yep.
And yeah, it's hard. History is truly not a comfortable pill to swallow sometimes. And
But
I've
this year
never.
we
What's
had
that?
I said, but this year, geez Louise, well, for 2020 and 2021, oh man, this section in the history books in schools across the United States is going to be huge from this point going forward.
Won't it be interesting to see, living through something that changes, to go back and read it, or to tell your grandchildren about it, or where you were when? I
Yep.
mean, the first ever feeling of, I remember exactly where I was when this happened, was with 9/11. And
Mm-hmm.
then now, as I get older, I know I will talk about 2020, and not just because of the pandemic or the derecho here locally, but also because of this race conversation that's gotten
You know,
um,
my
big.
daughter on inauguration day, she was in school, and the bulk of her, well, I don't want to put anybody in a bucket, but they're mostly Republican there. And so she hears a lot of stuff about that. But anyhow, on inauguration day, she came home, and I was like, I have to show you this video. I was like, there was this poet, her name is Amanda Gorman. I got to show you this video. And she was like, oh, Mr. Bauer showed us at school today. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, we watched it. She was like, are you talking about the girl? She did the poem, and she started telling me about pieces. I was like, yeah, I am. I was like, you guys watched that? I said, I was like, so did you watch the whole inauguration? She said, no, just that part. He said it was the most important part. And I was like, okay, then. All right. In fourth grade, you watch. I mean, it really just made me so happy because to your point, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And that was just a piece that it wasn't about race, but it was about our history and what we need to do to have a lot more unity. And it meant a lot to me personally. And the fact that my daughter came home from school in a class where she's one of two brown girls in her classroom, and her teacher had made it a point to read this, or to not read it, but have them watch this. I was like, wow, I'm so impressed. I was really happy.
Well, and I mean, when we have a female vice president in the office right now, regardless of what you believe in politics, or whether you like her or don't like her, or voted for them or did not, it is a moment in history that
So
not
much
only
for girls.
yeah, a woman and a woman of color. And I do look forward to the day when those aren't headlines, but it's very cool to live through those headlines and to
Yeah.
be able to be a part of that change, I think. And kind of embracing that is part of the story. Like, I said, well, gosh, it'll be great when this is no longer, women voting is no longer is no longer a headline.
Yeah,
And
taboo.
yeah, and I feel like America's been kind of behind, and with other, westernized civilizations out there, we've kind of been behind on that. But it's good to see it come forward, and it's good to see people, yeah, when it's just not always done in anger, them all of these, because it's been ugly.
Yes, it has.
Somebody recently challenged me. I quoted Harriet Tubman on something, and one of my African American friends sent me a message and said, "I'm glad you shared that, because it's Black History Month too
Mm-hmm.
now." But she's like, "I'm glad you shared that, but I would challenge you to find somebody to quote that's not mainstream. Like, that's my challenge to you." She didn't give me a name, she didn't tell me, but I was glad she did that. She knows how like open-minded I am to these conversations, and it gave me an idea for something new on my YouTube channel that I haven't started doing yet, but about looking into like getting out of mainstream history, not just with culture and race, but also women in general. There's a lot of women that have done a lot of things to further the progression of our abilities to be businesswomen and things that are really, we don't see.
Target has a book right now, 20% off. I'm not even doing this for any reason other than it was such a good find. But for Black History Month, one of the books that they have identified for young girls, I don't know the exact name, but it's about influential women leaders in Black history. It's an easy to read, and it's filled, and it's really good. So my oldest daughter has been reading it to my youngest daughter as our like bedtime story for the past couple days. And yeah, no, it's such a good read, and it's just so important to remind and just to be aware that our history is so much deeper than, what the eye can see and what the history books in schools have. And so kind of reaching out and finding our own ways to be aware of history is so important.
Yeah. A lot of times we put the people on the pedestal that ended up getting, the Nobel Peace Prize or whatever for something, but there's a lot of associated players in all of those success stories that I feel like that's where we really miss. Like one of the first rocket ship in space, and I don't remember the woman's name right now, but there was a woman engineer on that project that took that project further than most of her male colleagues, and we never heard of her before. And I believe, and I might butcher this, but one of the other people that I read about was a Black woman that I believe like was the actual inventor of the windshield wiper, and like something very obscure like that. It maybe wasn't a windshield wiper, but it was something to do with a car, and it was a Black woman. And of course she doesn't get credit for it, but it's a great story. And I'm like, these are some of the things maybe we need to seek out. And maybe that's how we start to learn that that these influences have always existed, but we just haven't put them on that pedestal quite yet.
Absolutely.
Well, I am super, super excited and very grateful that you decided to apply. We don't change the color of the women on our posters unless we're actively seeking that out. And I think it takes a lot of bravery to be one of the first ones to say, no, I believe in this enough to want to share my message. And I hope we make you very proud in that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for being a part of that. Tell everybody quick before we go, where they can, like Vivian Soul Food, both of the addresses in Cedar Rapids, so they can check you out.
Yes. So our restaurants are located. Our anchor store is on Williams Parkway Southwest. That's 2925 Williams Parkway. That is where you're going to get the full experience, the candied yams and the baked spaghetti, the oxtails, the full experience and full service. So it's dine in or carry out if you prefer, but with a server. We also have a full bar. So we have some really lovely complimentary drinks that our bar manager came up with about a year ago. Our second location is on the northeast side, just a shot down Edgewood Road on Blairsbury and Edgewood in the Fountains. And that one is our quick service spinoff. The goal of that was basically to provide some food to that quadrant of town. They don't have to travel so far, but being able to do it in a way that we could get them in and out. So we have some of the favorites, some of the things that you'll recognize, like the Phillies, our fried fish and chicken are definitely on the menu, but then a lot of new items as well, and a few fresh items because we're also on this health journey. So we have some wraps and some salads intentionally because of where we are in our life that are quick and very flavorful. So
very
that's
cool.
where you can find.
And then is your daughter's cookie business, is she ready to get that launched? Do you feel like she's going to be in over her head from the beginning with having so many people support Vivian?
We'll see how she feels this weekend. She wants to do like a stand outside or in the doorway of one of the businesses, and I'm like, we'll see. It's like it's negative degrees outside, so right. That's not an option for you, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that she'll be well received, and I think that she'll have a lot of lessons after this.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, one question I forgot to ask you, so we'll close it out with this. Who's Vivian?
My mother-in-law.
Okay, I wondered.
My husband had a ton of really interesting names that he wanted to name the restaurant, and I was like, no, scratch that. I said, when I think of soul food, I think of my mom-in-law. So we just need to call it Vivian's. It sounds soulful. It fits, and we landed on it. We went with it.
Yeah, it does. It does fit, and Yeah, I guess I just expected your name to be Vivian. So when it wasn't, I was like, I got to find out who Vivian is, or did you just go with some idea? But that's awesome. Is she living? Does she still live in Chicago?
Yep, she's in Chicago. She comes down, I would say every few months or so to visit,
Oh,
spend time with the kids. And
very cool.
she feels like a celebrity at the restaurant.
I bet she
With
does.
her
I was
name.
just gonna say, like, what a cool thing that she gets to kind of experience that, and to know that, her influence on her son and his, like, I'm sure his love language probably has a lot to do with feeding people's bellies. So,
Exactly.
and I'm sure hers did too. And I think that's a really cool legacy that you guys kind of get to leave for her and show to your daughters.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Everybody go check it out. I'll have all of her links in the description of the podcast, and then the uh, the words are so hard
I'm
sometimes.
right there with you. Oh my
Of the live video that's on Facebook, and then also it would be on YouTube. So if you check them out there, that's cool too. Thank you so much for being on today.
yes, thank you.
We can say goodbye to everybody now, and let me
Okay.
bye.
Bye. Have a great day.